Good evening, friends. Today we're going to be working on the second part of lesson 7.6, renaming fractions and mixed numbers. As always, we start out with our unit goal. What effects do addition, subtraction, and multiplication have on fractions? In today's lesson, we're going to be working on the goal, how can I rename an improper fraction as a mixed number? Before we start our lesson, there is some important vocabulary pertaining to this lesson. If you don't already have this written down somewhere, because this is the second part of the lesson, I would advise you to write this on your notes. Mixed numbers are numbers that are represented by a whole number and a fraction. An example of a mixed number would be 2 3/4. An improper fraction is a fraction with a value that is greater than 1. With improper fractions, the numerator is larger than the denominator. An example of an improper fraction would be 12/7. Yesterday we worked on changing mixed numbers into fractions greater than 1 or improper fractions. As a review, let's work on some of these together. 2 7/10 as a fraction greater than 1. There are a few different ways that you can solve this. One of the ways is by looking at how many wholes there are and adding the whole numbers to the fractions. I have to find a fraction that is equal to 1 with a denominator of 10. This would be the fraction 10/10. Now, because I have the number 2 as my whole number, I know that I need 2 wholes. So I'm going to add 10/10 twice. I still have 7/10 as well, so I do have to add that. Now I add the numerators. I always keep the denominator though. 10 plus 10 plus 7 is 27. 27/10 is equivalent to 2 7/10. There is another strategy that we can use. 3 2/3. In this strategy, we multiply the whole number by the denominator and then add that to the numerator. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 2 more equals 11. And just like in the other one, we keep the denominator. So 11/3 is equivalent to 3 2/3. For this last problem, I'm going to solve it both ways, just so that we can see the difference between the two methods. First, I need to figure out how can I find a fraction equivalent to 1 with a denominator of 5. I know that 5/5 equals 1, and since I have 4 wholes, I'll add 5/5 4 times. I can't forget about my fraction, so I add that too. Adding these all together will give me my numerator, since I know my fraction is always out of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 22. 22/5. Solving it the second way, I multiply the whole number by the denominator, and then I add the numerator. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 plus 2 is 22. 22/5. Either way, it works. You just have to find which one you're more comfortable with. So moving into today's lesson, we're going to work on changing a fraction greater than 1, or an improper fraction, into a mixed number. Our problem reads, to weave a bracelet, Charlene needs 7 pieces of brown thread. Each piece of thread must be 1/3 yard long. How much thread should she buy to weave the bracelet? Since we know we need 7 pieces of the 1/3 yard long thread, we need 7/3 thread. If we walk into a arts and crafts store and ask for 7/3 pieces of thread, they're going to look at us like we're crazy. So what we need to do is we need to change 7/3 into a mixed number. In order to solve this problem, we need to break up 7/3 into the unit fractions that make it up. The unit fraction for third is 1/3. So how many 1/3 pieces equal 7/3? It's 7. 7 1/3 pieces equals 7/3. As we break this up into the 7 1/3 pieces, it becomes easier for us to group together the pieces to find our wholes. Since I know that 3/3 equals 1 whole, I can group together my 3 pieces to find the wholes. As I do this, I see that I have 1 whole, and 1/3 left over. Now that I've broken my 7/3 up and I've pointed out where my whole numbers are, I'm going to add what I've gotten together. So I found 1 whole, another whole, and 1/3. 1 plus 1 plus 1/3 is 2 and 1/3. Now that wasn't that hard. Let's practice what we just learned by using these two problems. So I have 9/5. I'm going to break 9/5 down into unit fractions. How many 1/5 pieces do I need to make up 9/5? I need 9 1/5 pieces. So let's count our pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now that I have my unit fractions, I'm going to group my units so that I can find the wholes. I know that I need 5 1/5 to make 1 whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1 whole. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have enough to make another whole. Now I can add my pieces together. This is 1 whole. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 4/5 left over. So 9/5 is equivalent to 1 and 4/5. 11/10. How many 1/10 pieces do I need to make up 11/10? I need 11. So now that I have my pieces, I'm going to group my unit fractions so that I can figure out where my whole numbers are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pieces equal 1 whole. And I still have 1/10 left over. So if I add those together, I have 1 whole and 1/10. So 11/10 is equivalent to 1 and 1/10. Now I know what you're thinking. It took me a while to write out 1/10 11 times. So there must be a shorter way to do this, right? Let's find out. Another way that we can improper fraction, or fraction greater than 1, as a mixed number is by using division. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the denominator, or the bottom number, into the numerator. So let's take 7/3. 7 is my numerator, so I'm going to divide 7 by 3. I know that 3 goes into 7 2 whole times. 2 times 3 is 6. If I subtract those, I get 1 as my remainder. I'm going to take 2, and this is going to be my whole number. I know this because I know 3 goes into 7 2 whole times. My denominator of my fraction is going to be the same as the denominator that we had already. It's going to be 3. That never changes. Now when I look at the remainder, this is going to be what my numerator is. So the 1 comes up here. So I know that 7/3 is equivalent to 2 1/3. If we practice this again, I'm going to use the fraction 12/5. I'm going to divide 12, which is my numerator, by the denominator, 5. 5 goes into 12 2 whole times. 2 times 5 is 10. And if I subtract those, I get a remainder of 2. 2 is going to be my whole number, because 5 goes into 12 2 whole times. And I'm going to keep my denominator of 5. Looking for the remainder, I know that 2 is going to be the leftover pieces that make up my fraction. So 12/5 is equivalent to 2 2/5. Okay, at this point, I would like you to pause the video, practice working on these 3 problems, changing these improper fractions into mixed numbers. You can use either strategy that you would like, even though the second strategy is probably more practical to use than the other strategy. So after you've finished, you can start the video up again, and I will go through how to solve these problems. Good luck! Okay, so now that you've solved the problems, we're going to work on how we can solve them. In our first problem, 11/4, I'm going to use the division strategy. So I'm going to divide 11 by 4. 4 goes into 11 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. And if I subtract these, I get 3 pieces left over. 2 is my whole number, because I know that 4 goes into 11 2 whole times. And my denominator is going to be the same as before. It's going to be 4. I look to how many pieces I have left over, and that's 3. So I know that 11/4 is equivalent to 2 3/4. I'm going to solve this second problem using the first strategy of using unit fractions, just so that we can see how we can solve that. So I need to find how many 1/5 pieces equal to 6/5. So I'm going to write out 6 1/5 pieces. After I've done that, I'm going to go back into my 1/5 pieces, and I'm going to group together the 1/5 pieces into 5 pieces to find my whole. Okay, so I know that that's 1 whole, and I still have 1/5 left over. So 6/5 is equivalent to 1 1/5. This strategy becomes a little bit difficult when you have numbers that are larger, like the next problem, 13/10. In this problem, it wouldn't be very easy to do this strategy because you would have to write out 1/10 13 times, and that takes up a lot of time. In a problem like this, it would probably be easier to use the division strategy, so that's what I'm going to use. So 13 is our numerator. I'm going to divide that by our denominator, 10. 10 goes into 13 1 time. And 13 minus 10 gives us 3 pieces left over. My whole number is going to be 1. My denominator will be the same, 10. And my pieces left over are 3. So 13 tenths is equivalent to 1 3/10.